This episode of That Is Not a Noun is sponsored by VT Heroes. Take it away, and thank you, VT Heroes, for sponsoring this episode of That Is a Noun. That is not a noun. Let me do it over again. Hey, I want to thank VT Heroes for sponsoring this episode of That Is Not a Noun. Take it away, VT Heroes. And again, thank you for sponsoring this episode of That Is Not a Noun.
You just got kicked in the gut. Punch in the face.
Customize your hero using color, element, and totem. Flip your action cards to determine the winner.
Yes! It's my turn now.
Collect, trade, battle, and win. A new fighting card game has arrived. Play VT Heroes.
It's all for you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Ishmael from That Is Not a Noun. What's going on? What's going on? I had to change the screen a little bit so the people can see us a little bit better. But I'm back with you, and I'm truly, truly excited to have a special guest with me because my first love is poetry. I love writing poetry. I've been writing poetry since I was 15. I've had previous guests that were extraordinary poets, and this brother is another extraordinary poet that I have on today. And we're going to touch on the same topic. We're going to talk about mental health and poetry because they go hand in hand. And this brother has a story to tell, and I'm going to use my platform for him to share his story. The brother's based out of New York.
Yeah,
I know this brother for almost 10 years.
Yes,
Follow his work.
Yeah.
He's amazing. You're gonna love this brother, the one and only Robert Gibbons. How you, brother?
Yeah,
How you, brother?
I'm all good. I'm
How you
good.
feeling?
I'm good, my brother. I'm good. I'm feeling good. It's a wonderful day. We've had a beautiful 3 days here in New York City. I'm in Brooklyn, right in front of the beautiful Brooklyn Library. This is a place that I come to every day. And as a matter of fact, as you talk about mental health, this is one of the ways I've learned how to cope with my struggles of living in an urban city, just living in a place where there are millions of people at one time. It's always, and even with the past pandemic, we're still trying to organize space outside. So what this library has done, everything outside is always wired, so you can sit out here in front of the library and you can do your work. It's almost like an outside office. It's amazing to be able to sit out here. I could show you what I'm talking about. All the beautiful like wooden benches they've put up around the library. It's just amazing to be here. So thank you for giving me a chance to just talk a little bit this morning to my brothers that are out there in the world that might be listening to my voice, that have experienced the same thing that I've experienced or gone through the same thing. It's about healing now, my brother. It's about healing.
And I truly concur with you, brother. It's all about healing.
Right.
And one thing I've learned from my previous guests, especially the good brother Cesar Borojas, words has a powerful meaning, and the way you say things to certain people can impact their life. So what I try to implement in my life, instead of saying how you're doing, he taught me to say, instead of saying how you doing, say how's your heart today.
All right. That's great. That's great.
And so
That's
I'm
great.
trying to implement that because often when you say how you're doing, sometimes you really don't mean it. You just say it just to say it because it feels good because you
Right.
really don't care about what that person
Right.
feeling and how they're
Right.
doing. So you just
Right.
say it. So I care about you. I love you, my
Yeah.
brother. So
Yes, I
how's
do.
your heart at the moment?
Well, my heart is great. You know, I feel blessed. I feel that I have a certain type of privilege that I've really worked hard at getting to this point in my life where, I've built community, I've connected, I've tried my best to stay positive about who I am as a writer and an artist, but sometimes it's a struggle. It is a struggle. But today, right now, to answer your question, I'm balanced. I feel good about what's going to happen in the future. You know, and so all I can say is this: I'm here. I'm right here with you. I'm vibing with you. It's a great moment, and I'm glad we had a chance to have this talk because this will start my day. And so that's the thing about coming to the library, being in this space. I know the weather is changing and stuff. I know it's gonna get cold. The weather is already changing. But just coming to this institution, sitting here, having my daily morning gratitude list. And that's another thing I want to tell you. I write a gratitude list every day. I'm grateful for waking up. I'm grateful for my mother. I'm grateful for my father. I'm grateful for my friends that support me. I'm grateful for the literary life I live. Those kinds of things. And when you're talking about putting words into action, and that's where I think the greatest impact comes from when it comes to the gratitude list. And I'm stating my intentions for today. I'm not going to be negative. I'm not going to let that man that's on that train ruin my whole day like at one time it could. Yeah.
And I think that's important, and I love that you brought that up, brother.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm hearing the wind in the background reciting a poem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was trying to decipher what the wind was trying to say,
Okay. All right. Right.
because the wind can be deep sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but I'm glad we did it early this morning because after this is the main library here in Brooklyn. So after a while, it's gonna get very crazy because the park is right there, the Botanic Gardens is right there, the Brooklyn Museum. So it's gonna be outrageously,
it's gonna
you
be
know,
crowded. It's gonna be
crowded
crazy.
in a few, and it's the last of the beautiful days. They say tomorrow's supposed to change, so everybody's gonna come out.
That's right, man.
Yeah,
Well, for people who don't know Robert, who is
right.
Robert?
Well, that's a great question. I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in a little small town enclosed by sugarcane called Belglade. And the reason I'm telling people about Belglade is because recently the Sierra Club down in Belglade reached out to me and asked me to create a series of poems. They commissioned me to do a series of poems about the sugarcane, burning of the sugarcane down there. And if anybody is familiar with burning of the sugarcane, there's years and years of soot and smoke in the air. So Ishmael, this smoke has affected my people, my ancestors. There's no telling generations of people that have passed away. So I've written a poem. I've done videos for them already, but they want me to continue to spread the word about the burning of the sugarcane. So I'm from a little place in Belglade. Fortunately for me, my grandparents came down there through the migrant trails. So they came looking for work from Georgia to South Carolina to Florida, and this is the way they end up. If you're familiar with Zora Neale Hurston, you know that Zora Neale Hurston kind of goes around to these little all black towns, and Belglade is one of the places she came and she wrote some of her folk tales. And so, yeah, it's a very segregated place because we lived on one side of the town, and our lighter skinned brothers lived on the other side of the town. And I went to an all black school. I had all teachers. I went to an all black church. Everything was all black. And I guess for some people that might be a good situation, but as I grew and went to college in Tallahassee and went to Atlanta and went to DC and finally up here in New York, it tends to kind of give you a narrow-minded way of looking at the world. If you're not able to deal with other kinds of people. But I was fortunate. Both of my parents were educated. They both went to college. They taught me how to be open to things as they come.
And
Yeah.
then when did you knew you had a passion for writing?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's always kind of been in me. I remember going back to second grade and see, I went to elementary school where my mother was a teacher, so there wasn't many things that I could get away with. But one thing I did do in the second grade, I entered a spelling bee there. And so that's when my second grade teacher, Miss Helen Vereen, which was a great friend of my mom, she was like, your son has a great passion for words. She told my mother that in second grade, you should really encourage. So it was ever since then, my mom encouraged the reading, the writing, the oration, which comes along in the Black church. You get a chance to do Christmas speeches, so I did all those things. And my mom continued to encourage me to write. And in eighth grade, I entered my first poetry contest and won the poetry contest. And so it kind of followed me a little bit, but I really didn't pursue it until I became a certain age. And this was going through college, going through the messy college years, and then growing up, learning how to be responsible and be mature, and then saying, okay, what am I going to do? Do I want to be an educator? Do I want to be a museum educator? Do I want to be a historian? Do I want to be a history teacher? I've done all of those things. I've taught on ships. I've taught in the museums. I taught in the park. I've taught in the classrooms. I taught at the universities. So I've done a lot of things academically, but it still did not meet the secret self. And that's where the writing comes in. I've always kept a journal. And so that's where the writing comes in, my brother. Yeah.
And then, do you remember the first poem you wrote? Because I don't remember the first poem I wrote.
Right. That's what a lot of people ask me that question when I'm interviewed. Do I remember that first poem? It was some kind of goosey, woosey woo type of poem in the eighth grade, just trying to get the rhyme and, win the contest. But, it's always been there. And then I had a mother that was she was an English literature person. So, she always introduced me to Langston Hughes and Baldwin and Zora. So I was very fortunate, my brother, coming from the circumstances that I come from and having the kind of parents that I had that loved Black literature, especially, they love Black literature, and they told me about the names. And so I had that in me when I was a kid, and that's very, very important,
Right.
To the fathers out there that are raising kids. And I know there are some great fathers out there that are raising beautiful kids, teach them that history early, teach them that history early.
And that's important. And then also, do you remember that poem that you wrote or you read, and you're like, you know what, this is what I want to do? Because everyone had that one poem that kind of hit you hard, and you're like, this is my profession. This is what I want to do. Forget about the other stuff.
Right.
I want to do this. What was that poem? And do you remember that moment in time?
I do remember that moment. That moment came, when I finally decided that I was going to be honest about myself, and I think honesty is the very best policy, especially turning a certain age, like 40s, 50s, like I am in those age ranges, and then you want to still lie, you want to still keep secrets, you want to still hide. No, so I made up in my mind, and it kind of all came along together, that I was losing people all around me. People were dying, from disease, from alcoholism, from addiction, and I've suffered from all of those things. And I'm glad you bring this thing up about mental health, because I grew up in a place where it was either church or death. And you don't need to go to therapy, Robert. You need to go to Jesus. And for a lot of people in the African American community, okay, religion is okay. Your spiritual life is okay if that's what you ascribe to, but you also need therapy if you need therapy. And I came from a place where traditional religion was you need to seek Jesus first, or you need to seek a higher power first, and then you'll be all right. Well, in some cases, that's not all right. Okay.
Yeah, and that's so true too, because I remember I had a therapist on last year,
right?
And I equated religion as Pepto-Bismol. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, but you have to put in the work. You can't just pray and it goes away. You have to go see a therapist.
Yes.
Find other people out there that you can talk to.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things is to share your story.
Right, right, right,
Often we feel like we are comfortable sharing our story because we feel like if we do,
right.
we become we play this persona that we're going to be weak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
we
yeah.
we don't want to be vulnerable.
Right.
We want to wear this mask,
Yes, yes, yes,
and
my brother. Yeah.
and I
That's
think
you.
and I think that's important, and I think
Yeah.
that's what I learned about you as a writer too. Is
Right.
that when you're very open and transparent with your writing,
Oh,
you
thank you.
know,
I appreciate that.
and it's just a beautiful thing to
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
and but also like just talk about that too. Talk about
Yeah.
the addiction and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
things
Okay.
that kind of
Okay.
hindered you.
Okay. Okay. So
Um,
I grew up in South. I grew up in Florida in a very small place, one traffic light type of place, and one high school. So you can imagine the type of word that got around. And so if your mother was a teacher and your father was a teacher, those are big people in the community, in small communities in the South. And then, especially if they're attached to the community, sororities, fraternities. My parents were all a part of that. Religion, church, all those kinds of things, those standard type of things that build communities. My parents were a part of that. So I felt like, especially when it came to certain things of sexuality or addiction or any of those kinds of things that were totally antithetical to what they thought or what they believed, I had to keep those secret. I had to hide. I had to go to Miami to go to the club. I had to go to Fort Lauderdale to the club. I had to hang out. And oftentimes I think my mom and my dad, they knew what was going on. They wanted to give me a chance to talk about it. Hope good. It was a great idea for me to mature in that area and to be able to be total transparent with them. And I think that comes up in the writing too. When you hear these people that always want to use these big words and be abstract and confuse you and trap you up in their writing, those people too, they go through the same type of journey of just really, you know, not being honest with themselves. If I want to give you the impression that I'm smart, or I want to give you the impression that that I can use big words. Well, I can do those kind of things too. But at this point in my life, brother Ishmael, I want to be honest. I think honesty, people can deal with you better, whether they like who you are or not. At least you know who I am, bro. At least you know who I am. You know what
and
I'm saying? I've lied all these years. I've done things I shouldn't have done. I've treated people wrong. I missed jobs. I overslept. I stayed out all night. I did things I shouldn't have done. But right now, if you ask me, I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah.
I think that's important. You have to be honest, but to also just talk about how that kind of hindered your mental health of just hiding that from your family, thinking
Yeah.
that if you were open
Right.
about your sexuality,
Right.
that
Right.
they would kind of banish you. Like
Right.
just talk
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I did. I hid it. I hid it. Well, according to them, it wasn't a hidden thing. It was just all up in my head.
Right.
Robert, I can hear my mom when I finally had the conversation with her on South Beach in 2015 after I had married this person. This person was dying of cancer, and I was here in New York, crying and weeping, and because I know that person wasn't going to live no more than 2 weeks, and so I had to try to, hide all my pain alone. My family was down south, so they had no idea that I was married to anybody and had been married to this person for like a long time. We had kept the marriage secret because I wanted to keep it secret, not because that person wanted to keep it secret, because I wanted to keep it from them.
Right.
And so finally, when it was time for the cancer to just blow up and end everything, he was like, you know what? You need to go and tell your parents that you're going through this, because I'm not going to be here much longer to help you get through this. And I know you're going to fall apart. And he was right. He was right that, if I didn't have that conversation with my mother, with my family, that I needed the support. And my mom took it very hard because she was like, how dare you keep this from us? You know what I'm saying? Well, I thought I'm 50 years old. This is what I was told. I'm 50 years old. I thought you were going to disown you. How can we disown you? You know what I'm saying? We can't disown you at this point. All those kinds of things in your head. And by the way, we always knew who you were. We gave you the chance to tell us.
Wow.
And so this was the whole conversation. So after I realized that, brother Ishmael, that they were people that I could come and talk to no matter what I was going through. You know,
Right.
I lived this secret life in Belgrade with a few friends that were like me. We would sneak and do stuff, and all those people have died. I mean, none of those people lived because it was either addiction, or it was HIV, or it was AIDS, or it was drug addiction, or it was cocaine, or it was heroin, whatever they did. And we did it all because we had to mask the pain. You know what I'm saying? Because there were no outlets for people like us in the time we grew up, in the place we grew up, if you get what I'm saying.
Definitely. And then also talk about when you lost your mate
Uh-huh.
who passed away. Talk
Right.
about that dark period, because I remember in private conversation we had
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that was like your darkest period where you
Yeah, it was.
almost took your life.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about
Yeah.
that.
So it was like, you know, his name was Robert too. And you know, Robert, and Robert was a very, very, he was a very eclectic person. So he lived in New York. He had been in New York a very long time, and he wanted, you know, we loved each other. I'll say it like that. We loved each other. You know, he was from the Massachusetts area, so I would oftentimes go up to Massachusetts. His whole family knew me, his sisters, his brothers, his mother, everybody up there knew me, but nobody on my side knew Robert, the Robert that I had spent the last 10 years of my life with.
Right.
And so it came to a point where I had to be honest. And so Robert, all along, he was like, Robert, you got to get yourself ready for this because it's going to happen. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get 10 years down the road. Okay, I'm going to get myself together.
Right.
7 years down the road, get yourself together, Robert, for this because it's coming.
Right.
Okay, Rob, I'm going to get myself together. 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, you know, get yourself together. Okay, Robert, I'm going to get myself together. Well, my brother, I could never get myself together, especially after, you know, after they committed him into Calvary Hospital here in Brooklyn. You know, once you go to Calvary, that's the end of the line in the Bronx. So that's just like the last stop. And I was trying to work and leave Brooklyn and get to the Bronx every day and be there with him. And the body was just declining. And so I finally, you know, it finally happened. And it finally happened. And then I had to come back and live in that apartment by myself. You know, an apartment that Robert had lived in for 25 years. His stuff was everywhere. It was like one of the darkest time periods in my life. And so it was just like, if I don't seek help, I did go through grief and loss counseling for men. It was a special group here in New York. It was grief and loss counseling, especially for men of color. And so that was a specific type of group. And because I was going through the struggles that I was going through, they allowed me in so I could talk. And I still wasn't going to be honest about it. I still wasn't going to talk about me splitting my wrist or taking a razor to myself or, you know, ending my life. Or I got to have this conversation with my religious mother and my sanctified daddy and all these homophobic people around me that are really going to look down on me, where it was total opposite. Not only did those people not look down on me, those people loved and supported me, you know, in the end. And I gave them more power than they, you know, I gave them more negative power, if I could say that, instead of more positive power. You know what I'm saying? That my mom loved me. My father loved me. My brothers and sisters told me, you know, they told me. They said, we respect who you are, and we respect and love you so much. We just want to give you an opportunity to tell us, to open your mouth and tell us, my brother. I wouldn't even do that. I hid it, you know? And that's why it's very important, whether they like you or not, whatever that issue is, drugs, sexuality, whatever, tell them, you know, open up. Yeah. And the truth will set you free. I know it's a cliche, but it will. I was lying, you know, and I was clogged up and bogged up and hiding and couldn't be happy. Not anymore. Not anymore. And even here in New York, where it's supposed to be so open, there's so many liars and game players and people that won't be honest with themselves. So,
and
hey.
No, it's true. But also talk about what your father, when you told your father, because I remember you told me that story about what did your father, when you finally opened up to your father, what did your father say?
My father was really the big man in this, you know, because of course, I'm a man, and I like being a man. I like being a man. There's nothing else that I'd rather be. You know what I'm saying? My father, I have his name. I'm his oldest son, so it's all of that kind of issue around. And I'm Robert Gibbons. He's Robert Gibbons. So and I look just like him. He spit me out, and I love that. But it brought us closer. After years of being estranged, and I kind of felt like, he was the one that I was worried about more so than my mom. My mom is a little more flexible, but my father's like an oak. I mean, like, he is like tough. He's a man's man.
Right.
And so, he's not gonna go for too many things that are outside of traditional for him. He's a traditional man. And I love him to death now. I mean, like, I told him after I told him those things, he's like, you still my son, you still Robert. You still the Robert that I looked in, and we went through that whole, rehabilitation of our father-son relationship, and as a matter of fact, my next book that's coming out, I'm dedicating it to him because of that whole rehabilitation that we went through. Unfortunately, he contracted the COVID and he needed a kidney. So right now he's not in the best, but he's coming back because he's a strong Black man and I love him. And he did. He came through for me and he's there for me. You know what I'm saying? And now we're like the best of friends and there's nothing gonna stop us from loving each other. And that's a father to a son. And it's just like, he's one of my biggest mentors. Yeah.
And it shows in your work and it shows in your excitement, especially when you finally were open, and transparent. It just that burden just dropped off.
He needed to hear it. He needed to hear it. He needed to hear it, Ishmael. He needed to hear it. He needed to hear it because it's out there, and it's out there. It's in the church. It's in the schools. It's on the streets. It's they need to hear it. To be aware, and it's in the family. I want this kind of family. I want this kind of construction of family. But it is what it is, as they say. It is and whatever comes out, we have to be grateful and hopefully support those people. And how it happened, how it comes out.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you're sharing your story because there's a lot of people who's dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with, and they don't feel comfortable in their own skin.
They don't, bro.
To let people know this is who I am, because we still live in a society where they accept it, but they're still a part of the society that don't accept it.
Right.
So it just depends on your family and the people, your environment that you're in.
Right.
But do you remember that poem that embodies your struggle? And if you do I don't want to put you on the spot. Would you mind reciting it?
Yeah. I have a poem I was working on just for this particular this thing, and right. So this poem is called Migration. Yesterday, a moth traveled with me on the train, a dingy colored body with winged hood and thorax, abdomen and geometrics. It hitched for the ride, attached to the side of the seat like a strap hanger, perched, a mask of mimicry with big snake eyes, as much of a spectacle as it resides there in daylight. I thought time would be night travel or overnight, but it's morning. The squeaking violence of the train as his Ebola-bound body is cremated, sent back to the dust, back to Earth like a comet or asteroid, back to the prairies of Africa or Crimea, to the upper latitudes where transmigration happens, where we all become exoskeleton, not named by genius or species or categorized in box or identifying markers. We are one in the indivisible, not the critical mass of human mortality. And the reason my body floats on the Hudson is because I'm lost to history. I want to remain discoverable, not a matter of fact, but innuendo, and that death moth that followed me on the train waits in its journey, stationed as a sign of judgment, of time. And the train will come to an end one day. And I have to tell my story, so I shuffle the back roads of country past dump trucks and carcasses and the last of warehouses and slaughterhouses and old bread houses and old leather factories. And I still see the plastic of yesterday, so I had to hop this train. But there's more to the metaphor than a place for just sitting on a train, or a consummation of air and breath, more than the fanaticism and hysteria. But there on that train, the death hawk swoops and dips his oblong into the physical space, and it becomes natural, a natural inclination to reside with me. Only the mortal proclivity is bothered by this production. The reduction of one's own comfort, as I try not to look or be bothered by other people, but I have to look, I have to say, I have to talk, I have to be real, I have to tell the truth. Who's to say? I have to tell the truth, just like that moth is telling the truth. The reason there is evidence of my background, of my heritage, of my ancestry, it's all in my imagination. It's all in my imagination.
Wow, bro.
Do you like that poem? I wrote that poem just for you, my brother.
Bro, honestly, I intentionally closed my eyes when I was listening to it.
Right.
I was thinking of James Baldwin. That sounds like something that James Baldwin would say.
That's great.
And,
that's great. You put him in great company, my brother.
Bro, that was beautiful. And I want to end this episode of That Is Not a Now on that, man. That
I appreciate
it. That embodies everyone. Everyone can take a piece from that poem and apply it to their life. That is so powerful. Yeah, I can't say anything after that, man.
Thank you, my brother. Yeah, because
before we go, brother.
All right.
How can people find you? Where can they get your work?
Okay.
Please, the floor is yours.
Right. So my name is Robert Gibbons. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Robert Gibbons, on Instagram, Anthony Robert Gibbons. I do have a new book coming out. And so I can send the information to you and you can, put it in the atmosphere. But thank you so much for letting me share this little part of my journey with you. It's just a pleasure.